7 years ago, the pack elders carved a rune into Sigrid Halvardsdottir's left wrist and cast her out into the black pines for a gift they called a curse. The ability to see poison moving under skin like ink dropped into water, to see curses coiled around a throat like smoke no one else could smell. Tonight, 3 leagues from the exile hut where she has boiled bark and stitched wolves' wounds for coin, she will kneel over a dying man crusted in 9 days of blood and filth, press 2 fingers beneath his jaw, and feel the pulse of a bloodline the entire kingdom of Vernhold believes extinguished at the bottom of the Kolvroth ravine. If you are watching this from your own quiet corner of the world tonight, tell me where, and if banishment has ever taught you more than the people who cast you out, hit that follow before the fire catches. Comment section. I want to know, have you ever been punished for a gift you didn't ask for? The night Sigrid finds him, the frost has already started climbing his fingers. She almost walks past the shape at the base of the ravine, mistaking it for a felled elk carcass, black against the white crust of early snow. It's the smell that stops her. Not rot, not yet, but the copper and ash smell of a body fighting an infection it is losing. She crouches. 9 days, she will learn later, since the succession duel. 9 days since a prince of Vernhold was declared dead by his own brother in front of the assembled Thing, the great gathering stone, still slick with what everyone assumed was the last of his blood. He is not dead. He is worse than dead, dying slowly, deliberately, a wound at his side that should have closed in 2 days on any shifter healing at half strength, instead weeping black at the edges. Sigrid has seen wounds like this only once before, on a trapper who'd been fed slow poison for 11 days, before anyone thought to ask why he wasn't healing. Wolfsbane and silver paste, worked under a bandage where no one would think to look, reapplied by someone with access to the body. Not an enemy's work, a trusted hand's work. She doesn't know his name. She knows only that his shoulders are too broad for a common tracker, that beneath the filth his jaw carries the flat, deliberate scarring of formal duels, rather than the ragged marks of a hunting accident, and that when she finally works the poisoned bandage free, his growl, even half-conscious, even starving, vibrates the ground under her knees like something that has commanded rooms. "Don't," he rasps, when her fingers find the wound. "Don't touch it. Leave me to the wolves properly this time." "The wolves already had their turn," Sigrid says, and starts cutting away the dead skin with the small knife she keeps for exactly this. "They did a mediocre job." He laughs, one broken, disbelieving huff of air, and passes out before she can ask his name. She carries him the last half-league to her hut on a drag sledge meant for deer, hauling harder than her thin arms have any right to, because 7 years of exile have taught her that softness gets you nothing, and strength gets you left alone, which in her case amounts to the same mercy. By the time she gets him onto her one pallet, she has already logged 3 things any healer worth her salt would flag. The wound is silver and wolfsbane, meaning someone in his own camp did this to him. The duel that supposedly killed him happened at the Thingstone, meaning he is someone whose death needed 900 witnesses, and stitched into the collar of his ruined shirt, half hidden by blood, is a wolf's head seal she has only ever seen struck on royal correspondence. This is Lupe, a man poisoned slowly by someone close enough to touch him, left to die where the whole kingdom would believe the wound came from honest combat. She should turn him in. She should, at minimum, ask his name before she spends 3 weeks of her carefully hoarded elderbark and yarrow keeping a stranger alive in a one-room hut 12 leagues from anyone who would thank her for it. She does neither. She boils water instead. The first 2 nights, she doesn't sleep so much as keep watch, feeding the fire in small, careful increments, so the smoke won't carry through the pines to anyone who might come looking for a missing prince. His fever breaks and returns twice, each time leaving him thinner, the hollows under his cheekbones deeper, his breath rattling in a way that makes her press her palm flat against his sternum, just to feel it still moving. She talks to him sometimes, in the low hours, not because she expects an answer, but because 7 years of silence in a one-room hut have taught her that talking keeps her hands steady. She tells him about the yarrow patch she's been nursing since spring, about the particular way frost-burned bark smells different from rot, about nothing at all, really, just sound filling a space that would otherwise be too quiet to bear. On the third night, his hand closes weakly around her wrist, mid-sentence, eyes still shut, and he mumbles something that isn't quite a word, and she sits very still until his grip loosens again, telling herself it means nothing, and not quite believing it. His name, when he finally gives it 4 days later, arrives sideways, the way men admit things they're ashamed of. "Bjorn," he says, watching her grind wolfsbane neutralizing paste with more suspicion than gratitude. Just Bjorn. Just Bjorn who bleeds royal seals into his collar. His jaw goes tight enough that she can see the muscle jump. "You should forget you saw that." "I should have let you freeze," Sigrid says mildly. "And yet here we both are, disappointing each other." She presses the paste into the wound and does not look away from the black threading that still runs beneath his skin like veins of ink. Worse than a normal infection, worse than any wolfsbane dose she's treated before, because it keeps replenishing itself. Someone is still dosing him, or was, until 9 days ago, when whoever it was decided the ravine would finish the job the poison hadn't. He watches her hands rather than her face while she works, the particular wariness of someone who has spent his whole life being handled by people with an angle. Sigrid recognizes it because she wears the same expression in every mirror she owns. "You're not afraid of me," he says eventually. It isn't quite a question. "I'm not afraid of dying men. Dying men can't do much. I won't always be dying." "Then I suppose we'll revisit the question," she says, and does not tell him that his pulse, when she checked it that first night, was already stronger and steadier than any half-starved man's has a right to be. That whoever he is, whatever poison has been worked into him for 9 days or 9 weeks, his body is fighting with the kind of raw, furious vitality she has only ever read about in the old accounts of the first sovereigns, the ones who could out-heal silver itself if given enough time and enough reason to live. This is the frame that begins Loop C. Though she doesn't know it yet, something in him refuses to die correctly, and someone wanted him to die correctly, quietly, deniably, at the bottom of a ravine instead of in front of witnesses. 3 weeks pass in the hut, and in 3 weeks a great many things happen that Sigrid will later be unable to name cleanly, because they happen in inches. He learns to sit up without hiding the flinch. She learns the particular silence he goes quiet with when he's furious rather than resigned, which is the opposite of every man she's known. Fury in him goes cold and still, not loud. He starts, unasked, splitting the firewood she's been rationing her strength to split herself, and she catches herself watching the economical, brutal efficiency of the motion longer than the task requires. "You keep looking at me like you're waiting for me to break something," she tells him one night, not looking up from the herbs she's sorting. "I keep looking at you," Bjorn says, "like I'm trying to work out how a woman who was cast out for a curse is the only reason I'm not still lying in that ravine." A pause. "The elders who marked your wrist were fools. The elders who marked my wrist were following the law." She holds up her left arm, the pale exile runes stark in the firelight. Omegas, who see what they shouldn't see, get sent away before they can tell anyone what they've seen. It isn't about the curse. It's about what the curse is inconvenient for. Something shifts behind his eyes. Not pity, which she would have thrown the paste at him for, but a colder, more focused attention, as if he's just watched her hand him a weapon and is deciding how it fits his grip. "What do you see when you look at me?" She could lie. She has lied about this before, to protect herself from exactly the look he's giving her now, the look of a man deciding whether her gift makes her useful or dangerous, and whether those two things are the same. Instead, because 3 weeks of watching him choose not to lie to her either has worn something loose in her chest, she tells the truth. "I see old poison that's still trying to finish what it started. I see it slower now, days instead of hours, which means whoever's been dosing you stopped roughly when you fell in that ravine. And I see," she hesitates, because this part she has told no one, ever. "I see a mark under your collarbone that isn't a scar, it's a brand, older than the dual scars. Someone marked you as property, a long time before someone tried to kill you as an inconvenience." His hand goes to the spot without meaning to. For the first time since she pulled him out of the snow, Bjorn looks less like a wounded animal and more like a man remembering, all at once, exactly who put every wound on his body. This is where Loop B roots itself, though its full shape won't surface until the humiliation scene at the Tinsing weeks from now. Someone close to him, closer than a rival, closer than an enemy, has been hurting him since before he could walk away, and the duel that killed him was simply the final, most convenient chapter of a much older betrayal. He tells her, eventually, in pieces, the way men tell the truths that cost them the most. His half-brother Ragnvald has coveted the sovereignty since they were pups sparring in the training yard, and their father's counselor, a soft-spoken, silver-tongued man named Halston Iverson, who has advised 3 sovereigns and buried 2 of them, has spent a decade making sure Ragnvald's path to the Wolf Throne stayed conveniently clear of obstacles. Bjorn was the last obstacle. The succession duel, fought by ancient right at the Thingstone in front of the full assembly, should have been an honest contest of strength. Instead, Bjorn had spent the 2 weeks prior, slowly, deliberately weakened. Food that sat wrong, wine that left his hands trembling, a healer, appointed by Halston himself, who treated every complaint with tinctures that made the shaking worse instead of better. "I lost because I was already dying when I stepped onto the stone," Bjorn says, voice flat with the particular fury of a man who has had 3 weeks in a healer's hut to turn the humiliation over and over until its edges have worn smooth and sharp. "Ragnvald didn't beat me. He finished what Halston started. And the whole pack watched him win," Sigrid says quietly. "The whole pack watched him win. His hands curl. 900 witnesses watched my own brother put me on my knees at the Thingstone and call it honest combat. 900 witnesses will believe whatever they're told, because none of them know to look for slow poison in a man's wine. I know to look for it." He looks at her then, really looks, in a way that makes the small hut feel considerably smaller. "Yes," he says, "you do." Roughly a third of the way through this telling, into the 3rd week, the fire burned low. The wolfsbane finally, fully cleared from his blood for the first time in what he now believes was closer to 2 months of slow dosing. He reaches over and closes his hand around hers. Not gently, not as a wounded man grateful to a healer, but as an equal closing a hand around something he intends to keep. "Whoever you were before they marked your wrist," he says, "you are not cursed. You are the only weapon Halston Iverson never accounted for. If this is the moment that's making your chest go tight the way it's making mine, drop a comment telling me which line hit hardest. I read every single one, and this story only gets sharper from here." The pendant surfaces by accident, the way the truest things always do. Sigrid has one possession from before the exile, a carved bone pendant, black with age, that belonged to her mother and her mother's mother before that, small enough to have hidden in the hem of her cloak through 7 years of being turned away from doors. She takes it out sometimes at night, not for sentiment exactly, but because it's the only proof she has that she existed before the rune on her wrist decided who she was allowed to be. Bjorn sees it on the 11th night and goes very still. "Where did you get that?" "It was my mother's." "Sigrid." His voice has dropped into a register she hasn't heard from him before. Not command, not softness, something underneath both. "Turn it over." On the reverse, worn nearly smooth by 3 generations of thumbs, is a wolf's head carved in the old style, jaws open around a crescent moon, the private seal, he tells her, hand shaking slightly as he traces it, of the sovereign's claimed mate, cut only for women formally bonded to a ruling wolf king, and never, under any circumstance, given to anyone else. His own grandfather's seal, which means Sigrid's grandmother was not merely known to the royal line, she was claimed by it, bonded to it, before some quiet catastrophe erased her from every record the pack keeps. "They didn't banish you for a curse," Bjorn says slowly, putting the pieces together in real time, fury climbing under the words. "Someone banished you to bury this. An Omega with blood sight, who also happens to carry proof that your grandmother was claimed by a sovereign, is a walking inconvenience for anyone who benefits from the official histories staying official. Halston has been rewriting inconvenient bloodlines for longer than I've been alive." Sigrid stares at the pendant she has worn her whole life without understanding what it was. 7 years of being told her gift made her dangerous, when the truth, the actual, buried truth, is that her blood made her dangerous, and the gift was simply the excuse that was easiest to write down. "So I'm not cursed," she says slowly. "I'm a loose thread, someone forgot to cut all the way." "You're a loose thread," Bjorn agrees, "that is about to unravel an entire conspiracy in front of 900 witnesses." This is Loop C, fully seated now. The pendant is proof, and proof, carried by the right hands, in front of the right crowd, is a weapon no poison and no ravine can dispose of quietly. The plan they build over the following days is simple in shape and brutal in execution. The thing convenes again in a fortnight for the formal coronation that will make Ragnvald's stolen victory permanent, and coronations, by the oldest law of Vernhold, can be interrupted by any claimant with blood right and the strength to prove it in ritual combat before the assembly disperses. Bjorn intends to walk back into the world he was poisoned out of, in front of the same 900 witnesses who watched him lose, and challenge his brother again, this time healthy, this time clear-headed, this time with a healer at his side who can name every symptom of slow poisoning on sight, and a pendant that proves the woman naming them is not some opportunist, but blood already bound to his line. "They'll say I forged it," Sigrid says, turning the pendant over in her hands the night before they leave. "They'll say a great many things," Bjorn agrees. "It won't matter. Halston can discredit a claim. He can't discredit a wolf's head seal held up in front of the entire thing and a counselor's face when he sees it, because he is the only person alive who will recognize it instantly for what it is, because he's the one who buried the story that goes with it." They travel the 12 leagues to Vernhold's great hall on foot. Bjorn's strength returned enough now to run the last stretch as a wolf, easily twice the size Sigrid expected, black-furred and scarred, moving through the pines like something the forest itself had been keeping in reserve. She keeps pace on foot, with the particular grim endurance of a woman who spent 7 years learning that stopping gets you nothing. When they reach the tree line above the Thingstone and see the crowds already gathering for the coronation, banners up, the great gathering stone scrubbed clean of the blood it wore 9 weeks ago, Bjorn shifts back, human and bare, and utterly unbothered by either fact, and looks down at her, with an intensity that has nothing to do with strategy. "Whatever happens down there," he says, "you are not going back to a hut in the woods afterward. Not unless you choose it yourself. Do you understand me?" "That sounds like a claim, Bjorn. It's the truest thing I've said to anyone in 9 weeks. He catches her jaw, tilts her face up, and for one suspended moment, the coronation, the conspiracy, the 900 witnesses, all fall away into something considerably smaller and considerably more dangerous, the particular vertigo of being wanted by someone who has finally decided to stop hiding it. "I don't care what rune the elders carved into your wrist. I care what you did with the 7 years they gave you to disappear. You didn't disappear. You became the only person in this kingdom sharp enough to save my life and prove my blood in the same breath. That is not a curse, Sigrid. That is exactly what I need standing beside a throne." She doesn't answer with words. She answers by taking his hand, lacing her fingers through his, and walking with him down toward the stone. The Thingstone crowd goes silent in stages, the way a held breath does. First the closest ring of onlookers, then a ripple outward, until by the time Bjorn steps into the clearing, 900 wolves who watched him die 9 weeks ago are staring at a dead man walking, and the silence has a texture you could cut. Ragnvald, mid-ceremony robes and mid-ceremony smugness, goes the color of old ash. Halston Iverson, standing at his shoulder in a counselor's formal collar, does something far more interesting. He doesn't look surprised. He looks like a man recalculating. "You're dead," Ragnvald manages, voice cracking on the second word in front of every witness who matters. "I killed you at this stone. You fought me at this stone," Bjorn says, and his voice carries with the flat, terrible clarity of a man who has spent 9 weeks rehearsing exactly this sentence. "You didn't kill me. Your counselor's poison nearly did that, over 2 months of tainted wine, until my body finally cleared the last of it in a healer's hut, 12 leagues from here. A healer this pack exiled 7 years ago, for the crime of being able to see exactly what Halston Iverson has spent a decade hiding." The crowd's murmur turns to something sharper. Ragnvald's eyes cut, fast and involuntary, to Halston, the tell of a man who has just realized, in front of everyone, that he was a pawn and not a partner. Halston's composure doesn't crack, not yet. Not the way a lesser conspirators would. He opens his mouth to offer the kind of smooth denial that has saved him for a decade. Sigrid speaks before he can. 9 weeks ago you told this sting, your brother died with honor, in fair combat. Her voice doesn't shake. 7 years of being told she had no right to speak in rooms like this have burned that reflex out of her entirely. She holds up her left wrist, the pale exile rune plain for every wolf present to see. I am the healer, this pack cast out for a curse. I want you all to look at what I actually see. She lists it, flat, clinical, undeniable. The specific poison, the specific dosing pattern, the specific black threading under skin that no honest wound produces, describing Bjorn's condition the night she found him, with the precision of someone who has spent 7 years being punished for precisely this competence. Gasps ripple through 900 witnesses who have never once had slow poisoning explained to them in language this exact. Then she holds up the pendant. And I want you to look at this. The wolf's head seal catches the torchlight, unmistakable to anyone who has ever handled a royal document. This belonged to my grandmother. It is the private mark of a sovereign's claimed mate, cut for no one else, kept for no one else. My grandmother was claimed by this line before someone erased her from the record and banished her descendants to keep the erasure quiet. She looks directly at Halston as she says it, and watches, the whole clearing watches, his composure finally, publicly fracture. You didn't banish me for a curse, counselor. You banished me because I was proof of a bloodline you'd spent decades burying, and you gambled that an exiled Omega would never survive long enough, or matter enough, to be believed. Lies, Halston says. Too fast, too high, the smoothness gone entirely out of his voice. Fabrications, sentiment dressed up as. There is one way to settle it, Bjorn says, cutting through him with the flat, final authority of a man who has already decided the outcome. The old law still stands. Any claimant with blood right may challenge a coronation before it's sealed, and prove it in ritual combat before this wing disperses. He turns to Ragnvald, who has gone the color of ash and now the color of something worse. I am claiming that right. Not against a healthy brother in fair combat this time, against the truth, in front of everyone who watched you steal a throne with poison instead of strength. The duel that follows is not long, because it was never meant to be a contest of endurance. It is meant to be a public unmaking, and it unmakes quickly. Ragnvald, robbed of the poisoned advantage that won him the throne the first time, fights like a man who has never once had to win honestly, wild and increasingly desperate as 900 witnesses who spent 9 weeks mourning a dead prince now watch that prince dismantle his usurper with the calm, economical brutality of someone who was never actually weak, only, for 2 months, deliberately made to seem so. When Bjorn finally puts him on the ground at the center of the same stone that scrubbed away his own blood 9 weeks prior, the silence that follows is not shock. It's recognition, spreading through the crowd like a held breath finally released. Halston tries to run. He doesn't get far. The elders who conducted Sigrid's exile 7 years ago are, this time, the ones who put hands on him, because even conspirators discover the limits of loyalty once the crowd around them has watched the truth laid bare on a stone. He will face the thing's judgment in the weeks that follow, stripped of his council seat and his freedom both, the decade of quiet erasures he orchestrated unraveling one exiled bloodline at a time, as elders who once signed banishment orders on his word now scramble to undo them. Ragnvald, kneeling, bloodied, finally honest for the first time in the telling of this whole affair, admits in front of the assembly that he knew, not everything, not from the start, but enough, long before the duel, to have stopped it and chose ambition instead. The old law is specific about traitors of royal blood, not death, but permanent exile to the northern territories, stripped of name and claim, the very fate he engineered for his brother turned back on him with interest. And Sigrid, who 7 years ago knelt in this exact clearing while elders carved a rune into her wrist and told her the mark meant she would never belong here again, stands at the center of the Thingstone, while Bjorn takes her hand in front of 900 witnesses and does the one thing that undoes 7 years in a single sentence. "This pack owes this woman a debt it can never fully repay," he says, voice carrying to the furthest edge of the clearing. "I am not simply grateful to her, I am claiming her. Publicly, formally, by every right this thing recognizes. As my mate, and as sovereign's consort, blood right restored, exile revoked, by the same law that wrongly imposed it." He turns to face her fully, and for a moment, the 900 witnesses might as well not exist. "You were never cursed. You were always exactly what this kingdom needed, and was too afraid to look at directly. I am done being afraid of what you see." The rune on her wrist, the elders confirm this within the hour, with considerably more humility than they carved it with 7 years ago, was never a curse mark at all in the oldest texts, only ever a gift mark, misapplied by generations too frightened of blood sight to read their own laws correctly. When they offer to remove it, Sigrid says no, she keeps it. Let it mean, from now on, exactly what it should have meant from the start. In the weeks that follow, the pack rebuilds itself the way packs do after a decade of quiet rot is finally cut out in public, slowly, awkwardly, with considerably more elders suddenly remembering always having their doubts about Halston than actually had them at the time. Frida Ormsdottir, the old healer who was the only one to ever speak kindly to Sigrid before her exile, is reinstated as head of the Healers' Hall and personally oversees the training of the first cohort of blood-sight healers Vernhold has permitted in 3 generations. Torvald, the guard captain whose fear kept him silent while Halston worked, is not exiled but is stripped of rank, sentenced to serve under the very healers he once refused to protect, a mercy Bjorn insists on privately, telling Sigrid it means more to make a coward useful than to make him disappear. Sigrid moves into the Sovereign's Hall not as an ornament, but as its second authority in all matters of health and law regarding poison, curse, and blood right, a position the old records show existed once, generations ago, under exactly the title her grandmother would have held had history not been rewritten to erase her. The pendant sits now, not hidden in a hem, but displayed, restored, worn openly at Sigrid's collar, in the exact place it should have hung her whole life. The hut in the Black Pines she insists on keeping. Bjorn doesn't argue it. He only asks, the first time she goes back to gather the last of her dried herbs, to come with her, and stands in the doorway of the one-room shelter that kept him alive for 3 weeks, looking at the narrow pallet and the low fire pit and the shelves of jars she labeled in her own careful hand, with an expression she has never seen on him before. Something closer to reverence than gratitude. "Everyone in that hall down there," he says quietly, "would have let me rot in a ravine rather than risk Halston's temper. You didn't know my name, and you cut poisoned skin off a stranger by firelight." He doesn't finish the thought. He doesn't need to. She understands it in the particular way his hand finds hers in the doorway of the place, where none of this would exist without her. What does it cost a kingdom, in the end, to punish the people who see too clearly? Ask the 7 years it took Vernhold to notice it had exiled the one healer sharp enough to save it, and ask what else, right now, in your own life, is being called a curse simply because it makes the wrong people uncomfortable. Sigrid stands at the window of the Sovereign's Hall that night, Bjorn's hand at the small of her back, watching torchlight ripple across the Thingstone, where 7 years of her life were undone and remade in the space of a single afternoon. And for the first time in longer than she can properly remember, she does not feel like a woman waiting to be sent away. She feels like a woman who was always meant to be exactly here. Next time, the northern exile territories Ragnvald was cast into are not as empty as the old law assumes, and something waiting in that frozen dark has been counting the years until a disgraced prince wandered in alone. Follow so you don't miss what happens when the story it opens.